John Thaw in Goodnight Mr Tom. It was war. The whole village had gathered in the church to hear the Prime Minister broadcast the news. They listened to him on the vicar's crackling and venerable radio set. Afterwards they had drifted away in little groups or gathered in small huddles in the churchyard. Tom Oakley didn't care for war. Didn't much care either for the gossipy women and the do-gooders like Mrs. Ford, who gathered round the vicar, blocking Tom's path across the churchyard to the gate of his little cottage. So he shouldered his way through them, aloof and grumpy. They expected him to be aloof and grumpy, so that's what he was. The women scowled at him, as they always did. He was surprised then when the vicar caught his arm.
Oh, Mr. Oakley, I thought I spotted you sitting at the back there. Only, you've heard that our choir master, Walter Wingate, has just been called up.
No.
Which, as you can imagine, does rather present us with a bit of a problem.
Oh.
Only I have it on good authority that you're something of a musician yourself.
I used to play the organ a bit, if that's what you mean. Doesn't mean I know anything about choirs, or would want to.
We all have to do our bit, you know. It's your duty.
When I need you to tell me what my duty is, Mrs. Ford, I'll let you know.
At least tell me you'll think about it, Mr. Oakley.
I'll think about it.
The women watched him turn his back on them and trudge across the churchyard. He paused only by a gravestone to look at its inscription, as he did most days, as he had done since he had buried his wife and child there 20 years before. Some time later, a steam train bustled and huffed its way through the valleys and fields. It had left London early in the morning, and now the smoke and grime of the city were a far-off memory. On board, seated in neat rows, each with a cardboard label around their neck, were the evacuees, young boys and girls sent away from the city, away from the bombing, to new homes in the countryside, each of them nervous, unsure of their future, apprehensive. Tom Oakley heard the train's whistle as he trudged with a mug of steaming tea from his cottage to his workshop. He scarcely gave it a thought, calling his dog Sammy to his side as he settled to his work. But at the station, the ever-resourceful Mrs. Ford looked at the sprawling row of young children and their dilapidated clothing and overflowing bags with some foreboding. For an instant her resolve weakened. Then, remembering her duty, she pulled herself together and rallied her troops, marching them off towards the village. Tom was standing in the sunshine outside of his workshop, repairing a chair for the vicar, as she marched her charges past him. He looked up at the motley crew and at their hawk-faced leader as she knocked at the cottage door of Mrs. Holland, who lived opposite. He pitied the poor people who would have these ungainly children thrust upon them, and who would have to take them into their homes and families. He turned back to his work, hammering at the broken wood as Mrs. Holland stepped aside to let her new charge into her home. And then Mrs. Ford marched off again. Her pack of children was smaller now, and she glanced curiously at Tom as they passed by. Later that afternoon, he stood at his kitchen sink, washing himself, when he heard a knock at his front door. He took a towel and dried himself before opening the door. It was Mrs. Ford. Behind her stood a small wreck of humanity, clutching a brown paper bag. He looked in disbelief at them both.
Well?
You realise I am the billeting officer for this area?
What's that to do with me?
His name is William Beach, and his mother says she'll only let him be evacuated if he's put with someone who's either religious or lives near a church. And the Home Office says it is obligatory to take one. So I'm sorry, Mr. Oakley, but he just has to go somewhere.
She didn't wait for a reply, but turned on her heels and marched off, the sound of her sensible brogues echoing in the empty street. For a second they stood there, eyeing each other, a small frightened boy and a grey-haired old man. Then he spoke.
You'd best come in, then.
The boy hesitated, looking after the woman who had now retreated to the end of the street.
Come on.
He turned into his cottage and left the door open for the boy to follow behind. Reluctantly, William stepped into the hallway. Tom looked him up and down as if inspecting some poor specimen of animal at market. He shook his head slowly.
I'll take you, Michael.
Dropping his bag and peeling off label and gas mask, William awkwardly shed his mac. He handed it hesitantly to the man, who was still shaking his head, took it to the clothes peg in the hallway. Later he cooked him a meal and placed a large mug of steaming tea in front of him. But William only picked at the food in a desultory way, looking up at Tom from under half-lowered eyelids.
Look, if you've had enough, leave it.
The boy pushed his plate away, and whilst Tom sipped at his tea, he too picked up his mug, slurping as he swallowed. Tom looked on in disgust. There was a moment's silence, which Tom broke.
So, where are you from?
London.
Again silence fell on them, and Tom stood to clear away the plates. He trudged into the kitchen and turned back to see the boy standing awkwardly behind him. He sighed.
Look, I have to go out. You're all right for a bit on your own, will you?
Yeah.
Right. Have a look outside if you want.
He nodded to the boy and strode to the front door. He closed it behind him with a clatter, and William stood there, alone. Slowly he turned around, examining his new surroundings. He walked first to a bookcase, but there was nothing there of interest to him, and then he crossed to a fine oak-cased harmonium that stood in the corner of the living room. He tried to open it, but it was locked. And then he looked with interest at the framed photograph that stood on it. It was of an attractive woman in her 20s, and she held a small boy in her arms. As he looked, he heard the church bells chiming, and as he crossed to the window, he looked out into the churchyard. Meanwhile, Tom strode with determination through the high street. A bicycle clattered by him as he turned into the village hall, now being used by Mrs. Ford as a billeting office. He faced the woman, a stubborn look on his face.
I'm not having him, and that's that. What do I know about kids of that age?
Excuse me, Mr. Oakley. You have got him, whether you like it or not. And if you don't, well, you're just going to have to lump it, aren't you? For what it's worth, I wasn't happy about leaving the child with you either. But I'm afraid it's a case of needs must, Mr. Oakley. There's not another spare bedroom going in the entire village.
Then try another village.
That is out of the question. We all have to put our shoulders to the wheel, Mr. Oakley, even you. There is a war on, you know.
He turned away from her and strode out of the building, and as he did so, he nearly fell over the vicar.
Mr. Oakley, about the choir club.
Yes, I've said I'll try and be there.
Then he was gone, striding away along the high street. William had left the cottage to explore the graveyard. He stood now looking at an impressive marble angel that stood guard over an ancient grave. He was startled at the sound of a voice. A young woman on the arm of a uniformed RAF officer stood looking at him.
Hello?
You're one of the London lot, aren't you?
Yes, miss.
And a regular wild bunch too, I've heard.
What's your name, then?
William Beach.
Well, William Beach, I expect I'll be seeing you in my class shortly. And it's not Miss, it's Mrs. Mrs. Hartridge, all right?
So who you billeted with, then?
He lives there.
Oh, you mean Tom. Well, goodbye, William.
The couple had given him a baleful look when they realized who he was living with, and it filled William with still more foreboding. They left him standing there beneath the angel. Suddenly a dog was on him, barking wildly at him. William had little or no experience of dogs, and at first he froze with fear. Then he spotted a spade left by the sexton, and grabbing it, he raised it over his head.
Get away! Get away or I'll kill you!
Now, no talk about killing, all right? Because I reckon we've got about enough of that already.
Tom had appeared from nowhere and grasped the spade, twisting it out of his hands. Now he led him away and took him back to his cottage. There he sat the boy down in front of the fire and settled himself beside him. He began to poke the coals into a cheerful heat, and as he did so, he explained to him what was what.
Now, as far as the dog's concerned, it's my dog, that. His name's Sammy, and he's soft as me pocket, really. So don't you go taking no more sticks to him. Do you hear?
As he spoke, he waved the poker in the air to emphasize his point, but now William seemed to freeze before him, and then he went deathly pale. The boy's eyes rolled in his head, and then he slumped to the floor in a dead faint. Sammy began to bark fit to bust, and Tom dropped the poker and moved quickly to pick the boy up. And as he held him in his arms, he glanced at the poker where it had fallen.
Well, surely he never thought.
He picked the boy up and made him comfortable on a chair, throwing a blanket over him. He realized that the boy was not just frightened, but cold and exhausted too. So he left him to sleep, and as the evening drew in, he went through his small possessions in the old paper bag that the boy had brought with him, hoping to learn something more of his new house-guest. There was a letter, simply addressed to whom it may concern. It was from his mother.
Dear Sir or Madam, I asked if Willie could go and stay with God-fearing people, so I hope he has. Like most boys, he's full of sin, but he has promised to be good. But just in case, I've put the belt in.
He found the belt in the bottom of the bag, thick leather and heavily buckled. He looked at it with disdain and threw it back into the bag in disgust. It was dark when he led the boy upstairs to the little attic room that was to be his. He carried a blackout curtain that he placed over the small window. William looked around in amazement at the cheerful place with its bright walls and neat furniture. The curtain fixed in place, Tom turned to leave, but as he reached the door, he looked back at the slight figure of the boy.
Good night, then.
Good night, mister.
You can call me Tom.
The boy nodded shyly, and Tom left him there to get ready for bed. Downstairs, the old man looked round at his peaceful cottage, at the place that had been his alone for so long, and then, instinctively, he picked up the photo of the woman and the child from the harmonium and stood staring at it. From above, a voice suddenly called out.
Good night, Mr Tom.
He glanced up. There was a look of puzzlement on his face. Then he turned back to his photo. Tom Oakley always woke early. He liked to get into his garden and tend his vegetable patch before the business of the day began. The next morning was no exception, but as he dug at the cold earth, he felt eyes upon him, and looking up, he saw William staring down at him from the attic window. There was an apprehensive look about the boy that made Tom drop his spade and make his way to the attic. The boy stood sheepishly beside the bed. Tom's eyes were drawn to the wet sheets.
Sorry, mister.
Get them wet things off.
As the boy took off his wet pyjama trousers, Tom began to strip the bed sheets. He glanced up at him.
And the jacket.
Reluctantly, William pulled off the jacket and gave it to him. Tom left the room with the soiled things, and, because the boy kept facing him, he did not see the terrible bruises and cuts on his back. Having put the washing into soak in his old copper washing kettle, and having seen the boy properly dressed and breakfasted, Tom led the way into the village high street.
Now, here's the post office. If you just get a stamp and post this for me, will I have a quick word with the doctor?
Tom trudged off in the direction of the doctor's house, and William entered the little post office. There at the counter stood another little boy about his own age, and obviously another evacuee. The boy stood writing a postcard in minute lettering, holding a magnifying glass so that he could see what he wrote. The postmistress looked on in astonishment.
Your mum won't be able to read that.
Yes, she will. She's got one of these too. And this way, you see, you get twice as much on.
The boy turned then and grinned at William. Meanwhile, a grim-faced Tom sat in the surgery in front of Dr. Little.
You see, when I got him up this morning, I found he'd wet the bed.
Not uncommon occurrence, Tom. The child who's been ripped out of his home practically by the roots and dumped in some alien place.
But what am I supposed to do about it?
What we're all having to do these days, Tom.
Huh?
The best we can under the circumstances.
Tom stared glumly at him. It wasn't the answer he had wanted. In the High Street, the dark-haired boy had mounted a bicycle, and with William trotting beside him, they made their way through the village.
So, what's your name?
William Beach.
What's yours? Zacharias Wrench. My parents' idea of a joke, I think. But you can call me Zach. Who've they put you with?
Mr Tom.
I'm here with the doctor and his wife. Friends of my mum and dad's. It'll come in handy, I suppose, if I'm never ill.
They had arrived at the surgery, and as Zack dismounted, Tom appeared at the front door. He nodded at Zack and turned to William.
All right. Come on, then.
See you around. Yeah, bye.
And Tom led the way back to the cottage at a brisk pace. Later that morning, Alice Fletcher was watching her 2 burly sons build her new Anderson shelter at the back of her cottage. Behind her on a pair of steps, Tom was busy repairing some loose brickwork in the back wall of her cottage. She watched the boys with undisguised maternal admiration before turning to the man.
Good lads. Have you got your Anderson up yet?
It's been delivered.
I'll send the lads round if you like, give you a hand.
I can manage, thanks.
Who said you couldn't?
You still a member of that knitting circle round at the church?
Of course.
Only, you'll have heard I've been landed with one of these evacuees.
Talk of the village.
I bet. Only the only clothes he's got are what he's standing up in, you see.
You haven't got to clothe them, you know.
Or he wasn't planning to. It's just that I was wondering if between you could, like, rustle him up a couple of things.
I'll think about it.
She grinned an unashamedly flirtatious grin at him, and awkwardly he turned back to his work, abashed by her look. It was still only a few days later, quite early in the morning while William was still asleep, that Tom was disturbed by the arrival of Alice Fletcher's boys. They plumped a huge pile of clothing on the kitchen table.
What's all this?
My mum sent them for young William. Well, there's no way I, George, can get into them anymore.
Right, thanks.
See you later, Mr. Oakley.
Will ya?
Give you a hand with the Anderson.
Ah, that.
He nodded his goodbye and took the pile of clothes up to the attic room, handing them to an astonished William.
For me?
Well, who else? Well, come on, let's see if they fit.
William scrambled from the bed, then stood shamefaced once more at the sight of the wet sheets. Tom sighed.
Never mind.
The boy pulled off his pyjama jacket as Tom held out a new shirt for him to try.
Come on, then.
Tom indicated for him to turn round. William did so reluctantly. For a moment Tom stared blankly. He couldn't take in what he saw. He had never seen such cruelty. He could not comprehend it, could not understand the wheals and bruises that crisscrossed the boy's back. He stormed from the room, made his way downstairs to where he'd left the brown paper bag. He fished around in it and pulled the dreadful belt from inside it. Then he walked purposefully to the back door, stepped out into his garden, and threw the belt as far as he could, as if the thing was tainted, as if its presence tainted his home. The boys came round later that day to build the shelter, and while they dug the foundations that Tom had carefully pegged out according to the directions, there was no sign of William. Tom found him indoors, watching the others enviously through his bedroom window.
Now, I thought you were supposed to be helping.
Your new shirt will get dirty.
Then take it off.
He stopped, realized what he'd said.
Go and change it, then.
So he changed, but later the Fletcher boys began to tease him as he sweated inside his thick jersey.
Aren't you roasting in that jumper, William? No.
He's got a temperature, hasn't he? Trying to sweat it out of himself, if you must know. Well, come on then, chop, chop. Want this finishing by tonight?
And William looked up at him, surprised and grateful. It took them most of the day, but by evening the shelter was erected, all but the sandbags that were filled but not yet lifted onto the tin roof. The Fletcher boys had long gone home for their tea, and William sat exhausted by the bags when Tom appeared in the garden all clean and scrubbed and in his Sunday best.
I'm going over to the church for a bit. Back in about an hour, all right?
All right.
He left the boy and made his way to the church where the choir awaited him. He'd been working with them for some months now, but they still fell short of his expectations. With a heavy heart, he played the first notes of Jerusalem, wondering how they would perform it this evening.
Just a minute. I mean, have I been wasting my time these last months or what? It's uplifting people want, not burying. Now start again. Let's put a bit of beef into it this time.
Some sort of problem, is there, Mr. Oakley?
Nothing I can't sort out, if left to get on with it.
Right.
And so, put firmly in his place, the vicar backed away into the shadows of the church, and Tom turned a steely eye again to his ragged crew.
Now, this time, I want to hear you, all right? So.
And so they sang and sang fit to burst, and for once he was pleased with them as he made his way back to home. But he was puzzled not to find the boy in the house, and worried. It was near dark and getting cold. Then a thought occurred to him, and he opened the back door and stepped out into the garden. The boy was there, slumped over the shelter. All the sandbags were now in place. He was shaking and bathed in perspiration.
Have you no more sense than to be out here this time of night? Do you want to catch your death?
You said we had to finish it tonight.
What?
Then he realized, saw what the boy had done for him. He shook his head.
All right, come inside then. Come on.
And the boy dragged himself in, towards the man, towards his home. It was the next week that he first experienced Mr. Tom's temper. He was bored watching the army lorries trundle through the village high street. It had been great fun when they'd first arrived, but now he was bored. It was then that he had noticed that there was a key in the lid of the old harmonium. Tom was sharpening an axe in his workshop when he heard the sound of the instrument. He marched quickly to the cottage and reached over the lad and slammed the lid shut.
Don't you ever touch that instrument again without my permission. Is that clear?
He turned on his heel and was leaving the room when he hesitated. He could feel the fright of the boy, sense his terror. He hadn't meant to be so short with him.
Look.
He turned slowly back.
I'm going fishing this afternoon, if you want to come.
The boy looked at him, uncertain, and then he grinned. The old man returned to his axe sharpening, but suddenly there was the sound of a bicycle and the slithering of tyres in the dust. He looked up at the bright and eager face of Zack, smiling at him.
Need me help?
I think I can just about manage, thanks.
There's Will about.
Will?
Running for William. Only I think Willie sounds silly, don't you? So, there's William.
We were just off out, actually.
Oh, going somewhere nice?
Fishing.
Really? Can I come?
What Tom hadn't realised when he nodded his acquiescence was quite how sociable a child Zack was, and how he would naturally assume that such an invitation applied to as many of his friends as he thought fit. And so it was, to the amazement of the village, especially Alice Fletcher, that Tom Oakley was to be seen that afternoon leading a troop of no less than 7 young evacuees to the river, all armed with poles and string. His little troop stood by the river in happy silence, dangling strings and hooks in the water. William stole a secret glance at Tom, grateful to him for his rare pleasure. Tom caught his eye, and he nodded silently to the boy. It was a moment of understanding between the two of them. Then young Carrie, a fair-haired little girl with pigtails, turned an admiring face to Zack.
Zack, is your dad really an actor? And my mum. Of course, Dad's an auxiliary fireman now.
He was cut short by the roar of an aircraft. It was a Spitfire, and it swooped low over the fields and skimmed the treetops nearby.
Wow!
It roared along the river, banked steeply to the right, and climbed high above them. Then, turning back, it performed a series of barrel rolls. Tom and the children stood awestruck, and then Carrie spoke up.
Mrs. Hatchett's husband's a pilot. I wish I was.
Tom looked again at the Spitfire. Now it had turned away and flew low over the village. In the high street in front of her cottage, Mrs. Hartridge looked up at the aircraft. It flew low towards her, and as it climbed away, it tipped its wings in salute and greeting. She watched it as it flew away and became a small dot in the distance, and as she watched, she wondered. For William and the other evacuees, the summer fun had to come to an end, and it did so with the start of the new term. They must go to the village school and start another part of their new lives. With a heavy heart, one morning in early September, William dragged himself downstairs. Tom was waiting for him in the front room with his school satchel. He was tucking some sandwiches inside it. He looked up at the boy's gloomy face.
Well, cheer up. It's only school you're going off to, you know. Not your own hanging. Got everything, have you?
He buckled up the satchel and handed it over.
Off you go, then.
He led the boy to the front door and stood watching him as he reluctantly stepped out into the high street. Once he looked back, but Tom smiled at him and nodded encouragement, so, with head down, he plodded off. He arrived at the village school, but couldn't bring himself to enter the playground. The place was teeming with happy, laughing children, but he hung back, staring at them through the railings, not able to muster up the courage he needed to enter. Then he saw Zack, playing with a group near the school building, and Zack called to him. Suddenly, Will lost his fears and trepidation, and throwing his bag over his shoulder, he ran into the playground and across to Zack. But his happiness was to be short-lived. Within a few hours his delicate world was to be shattered once more. They were in class, The playground now a forgotten memory, a little moment of happiness in what was now a bleak day. She called him to the front. He stood there before them all as she spoke to him.
I'm sorry, William. It's the door just across the hall.
The boy turned away from her and made his way towards the door with slow, dragging footsteps. He picked up his pencil case on the way. Tom was working on the Websters' cottage, and from his vantage point at the top of the ladder he could see William walking along the high street. He stopped his work to watch him, puzzled. And then William, catching sight of him, broke into a run and clattered his way into the cottage. With a sigh, Tom climbed down from the ladder and made his way over to the cottage.
William?
He looked around, but there was no sign of him. He swiftly made his way up to the attic room. He found the boy leaning against the window.
Now, what's the matter?
They put me with the babies.
Tom looked at him and then took him by the shoulder. He led him swiftly back through the village to the school. It was break time, and the children were playing outside. Mrs. Hartridge was on playground duty, and Tom left William by the gate, giving him an encouraging pat on the shoulder. He made his way over to the woman.
Can we have a word?
Of course, Mr. Oakley.
William tells me you've put him in the babies' class.
That's right, Mr. Oakley.
Well, would you mind telling me why, when you've got all his friends in your class?
Because they can read and write.
Tom rocked back on his heels. He had been ready to argue, to fight the boy's cause against prejudice, resentment of evacuees, anything. But it had never occurred to him that William could not read or write. Even children half his age in the village could do that. He resolved there and then that William would never suffer the indignities of illiteracy again. The lessons began that night. Tom carefully drew a series of dots on a piece of paper and placed them in front of the boy. He handed him a newly sharpened pencil.
Now, join up the dots and see what you end up with.
Biting his lip with the effort of concentration, the boy took the pencil, but broke its point at his first attempt.
Never mind.
The old man pulled a penknife from his pocket.
Now, try again. Only this time, take your time. Don't try stabbing it to death. There you are. Have another go.
With lip pushed out and hand trembling, William slowly, painstakingly, drew out the letter W.
It's bad, isn't it?
No, it isn't. Not bad at all. Now just get on with the next one. That's it.
Slowly, carefully, he joined up the dots, and with great labour he formed the letters, until he looked up in triumph.
There you are, you see. You've written your own name.
Oh, Mr. Tom.
Now, draw a line under that and get it copied.
William drew a line under his words, a perfect line, as straight as an arrow.
And before you do, just you draw me another line. Them straighter than I can do with a ruler. Wherever did you learn to do that?
Just did it.
Go on then, get it copied.
Won't I go to hell?
Hell?
Only you go to hell if you copy, don't you? It's cheating.
Well, whatever lunatic told you that? Never mind. Just do it. And if a chap with horns and a pitchfork comes looking for you, we'll blame me, all right?
So began William's education. Every day he wrote a little more and copied his letters until they were perfect, and every day Tom read to him.
Tinderbox. A soldier was marching along the high road. Right, left, right, left. Everybody used to mock him and make fun of him. The eldest son wanted to go and cut wood.
The kingdom was certainly very small.
He began to read and to write, and all the while, in between times, he would sketch and draw, and Tom marvelled at his ability to catch the image of Sammy, or a tree, or a flower. It seemed he could draw anything he saw with a natural grace and ease. One morning, William looked from his bedroom window across into the old churchyard, and there he saw Mr. Tom kneeling by one of the stones, tidying the grave and placing flowers there. Hastily he ran down to join him, not even bothering to change out of his pyjamas. He looked at the words on the stone, but his reading was not yet good enough to make them all out.
What's it say, Mr. Tom?
In loving memory of Rachel Oakley, aged 27 years, a dearly beloved wife. Also John Oakley, aged 5 years, a dear son, now with God.
And did they just die?
No. They caught scarlatina.
What's scarlatina?
A disease. A killer. At least in them days. 2 weeks, it was all over. Or so I'm told.
Why didn't you catch it?
Because I wasn't here, was I? No. I was on a ship on convoy duty. Fighting for king and country, as they say. No way of getting home, of course. In fact, by the time I did, I was already in the ground.
What was he like, John?
As bright as a button. Sharp as sixpence. Naughty sometimes, but full of life to the brim. In fact, very much like her, really. Anyway, what's this? Out here in your pyjamas, not even dressed yet.
I wanted to show you something.
Huh?
Come on.
He ran back towards the cottage. The old man followed as fast as he could, and Tom led him up to the attic room. There he triumphantly pointed to his bed.
Well?
Dry, Mr. Tom. It's dry.
Hey, that's great, William. That's really great.
Still smiling, Tom left the cottage, and as he stepped from his front door, he met the postman clutching a handful of envelopes.
Somebody's birthday, is it? Been steaming them open again, have you, Matthew? Any from London? Never noticed any London postmarks. You do surprise me.
Still holding his letters, Tom made his way to the village shop. He stood staring through the window for a moment at the display, though he knew what was there. He had, after all, looked at it many times in the last few weeks. So he finally went in and inquired at last about the price.
2 and 6?
This is quality stuff, Mr. Oakley.
I suppose it was only a matter of time once the war had started, before the profiteers started coming out the woodwork.
Thank you.
He picked up the magnificent box of artists' paints and brushes and left the shop. As he walked by the churchyard, he did not notice young William, who sat engrossed before the marble form of the angel, some Victorian relic sitting guard over a lost soul. The boy was sketching, catching on the pad the very essence and shape of the figure. But the sudden ominous rumble of thunder overhead was the almost immediate precursor to a heavy downpour. William clutched his sketchbook to his chest and ran swiftly to the church, the nearest place for him to take shelter. Inside the church he suddenly stopped. There was something about the place, something new and awe-inspiring to him. Then something caught his eye. It was bright and brilliant, magnificent and important. The eagle that stood over the pulpit. He sat entranced and pulled out his sketch pad. Tom was looking for him. It was getting late, and he hadn't seen him all day. He wandered here and there looking for him, and then suddenly he thought of the church, though why the boy would be in there he could not imagine. But there he was, engrossed in drawing, head bowed, slumped in a pew. He did not hear Tom behind him, nor hear the intake of breath as Tom saw the magnificence of his drawing. Then, recovering himself and making the boy jump, Tom spoke out.
So this is where you've been hiding yourself. You do realise your tea's been on the table for nearly half an hour, do you?
Sorry, Mr Tom.
I should think you are.
William ran hell for leather past the man and out of the church, through the churchyard and into the cottage. And it was then that he realised that Mr Tom's anger was only a game, a tease. They were all there, Zack, the Fletcher children, Alice Fletcher and some of the evacuees, and at the sight of him they burst into song.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear William. Happy birthday to you.
And there was Mr Tom with a magnificent cake and candles, real candles.
Go on then, blow.
And if you manage to blow them all out, you get to make a wish. Only you can't tell anybody that wish, because otherwise...
Just blow the damn things out, William.
And so they played games, and opened presents, and ate cakes and sandwiches until they were stuffed. And though they weren't to know it was the very first birthday party William had ever had, Tom perhaps guessed this, and his sombre face drew the attention of Alice Fletcher.
So didn't she even send him a card then?
Nothing.
Shame on her. Now come on, let's have a tune out of you.
Come on, Alice. You know better than to ask that.
Look, Rachel wouldn't have thanked you, for letting it rot away in the corner just because she's not here to play it anymore. You can't grieve forever, Tom.
For a moment he hesitated, looking across at the harmonium and the photograph on it. And then he smiled at Alice and half nodded at her. He went over to it and carefully opened the lid, blowing the dust from the keys. And then he started to play.
It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly. Farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's still there.
It was all over too soon, and in no time the party had finished, and William and Tom were waving their goodbyes. Then he led the boy back indoors and hesitated for a minute before handing over to him a small package.
Oh, and this is for you as well, by the way. Nearly forgot to give it to you. Happy birthday.
Thanks, Mr Tom.
He pulled the wrapping paper off the package, and his eyes started from his head at the sight of the artist's materials, at the paint box, the brushes, the paper. He could hardly speak.
This has been the best time I've had in my whole life.
But suddenly, the whole affair was too much for him. The rich cakes, the sandwiches, the excitement. He was going to be sick, and he ran from the room.
Obviously.
He didn't believe his life could become any better, but the next day he was asked to stay behind after school to see Mrs. Hartridge. He knocked on her classroom door with nervous apprehension.
Come in.
Mrs. Black said I were to see you before I went home.
That's right, William. I've got a bit of news for you.
He ran like the wind all the way back to the cottage. Life had got better and better, even when he thought there was no more joy to be had. He burst through the cottage door, full of his news.
Mr Tom, I've been moved up to Mrs. Hartridge's class. She says I can read and write good enough now.
But something on Mr. Tom's face made him stop dead. He held up a letter.
It's from your mum, William. Seems she's not been very well. Wants you back.
It was the day of his departure, and miserably he sat next to Mr. Tom in the little trap on their way to the station. As if to add to the gloom, a couple of lorries trundled by them. They were packed with soldiers, bloodied and exhausted, their dull eyes staring out at nothing much. A few of the village women ran into the road to pass loaves and a meat pie or two to the exhausted men, but they were too tired to even murmur a thank you. William looked up at the old man.
Where have they come from, Mr Tom?
A place called Dunkirk. Lucky to get out alive, I heard. Walk on!
The old horse took the strain and the trap trundled along the street in the wake of the lorries. Now the villagers turned to watch them and their equally sad progress to the railway station. It was well known how Tom Oakley had changed the boy's life, and indeed how the boy had changed his. Among the little group who watched them go was Zack. He raised a hand and turned away to hide his tears. The train arrived too soon for either of them, puffing and squeaking to a halt by the platform on which they stood. Tom turned to the boy.
Now, don't forget to write. And if you do change your mind about them paintings of yours, you just let me know and I'll post them to you, all right?
They belong here with you. And anyway, they'll still be here when I get back, won't they?
Of course they will.
I will be coming back, won't I?
Of course you will. Now you just take good care of yourself, you hear? You just take your time. You haven't seen your mother for a few months, so it's bound to be a bit awkward at first.
He helped him up into the carriage, and William suddenly turned to him.
I'll miss you.
For a second they stood there, the boy in the carriage, the man looking at him through the window, and then the guard came over. Tom turned to him.
You'll make sure he gets off all right. Don't worry.
They looked at each other once more, and Tom suddenly patted the boy's hand where it rested on the doorframe. He nodded then and stepped back as the train whistled and slowly puffed from the station. He stood watching the train for a long time, until it was no more than a trace of smoke on the horizon, and the platform was quite deserted. Then he turned for home. He slept for most of the journey, and indeed he was still asleep when the train pulled into the station in London. It was the guard who shook him out of his slumber.
Here you are then, son. Rise and shine.
He looked up, blinking sleep from his eyes, confused about where he was. Then he took his bag from the luggage rack and stepped out onto the platform. For a moment he looked around lost, and then he saw through the crowd a pale, thin, pinch-faced woman, hat pulled low over her eyes. She was looking at him, but her expression was blank, unrecognizing. He ran to her. She looked at him puzzled.
Willie?
She reached out a tentative finger and touched his face with an air of distaste.
You look different.
Put weight on.
She bent down to pick up her bag.
I'll take that for you.
I'll say what to take and not to take.
She took her bag and marched towards the barrier, the boy trotting beside her. He looked up at her.
So, how are you feeling now?
Fine. I'm fine.
I mean, they said you was ill.
Did they? So, what you got in the bag then?
Just me things, and a present for you from Mr Tom.
Mr Tom?
Mr Oakley, the man I stays with down there.
Well, I don't need charity, thank you.
It's just some bed socks, and Mrs Little, that's the doctor's wife, just sent you a bottle of tonic wine.
Wine? Haven't I told you about the evils of drink?
It ain't a real drink, Mum, like you get in a pub. It's got iron in it to help you get your strength back.
And what would you know about what you get in a pub?
With a look of horror on her face, she ended the conversation by sweeping through the ticket barrier. They found a bus, and in the gathering night, cold and tired, he found himself whisked through the blacked-out streets of London to be deposited into the darkness of his own street corner. As they climbed down, she turned to him.
When we get home, I want no noise from you, all right?
Why?
Because nobody has to know that you're here, that's why. And when we get inside, I've got a surprise for you.
Home was the basement flat of a filthy, dilapidated house in a gloomy street where rubbish lay in piles and there was a permanent feeling of dampness. She struggled with the front door key and bundled him into the hallway. He hung his gas mask on a peg and stepped tentatively into the gloomy interior. There was no cheer here, no fire, no warmth, and no sense of happiness. He stood sniffing the air.
What's that smell?
What smell?
Doesn't matter. No dog, is it, this surprise?
What surprise?
This surprise you got for me.
It's over there, in the box.
He stepped over to where she had indicated a tatty cardboard box, perched precariously on a kitchen stool. Hesitatingly, he looked inside and drew in a breath.
It's a baby.
It's a present from Jesus.
Instinctively, he went to pick her up, but his mother rounded on him.
Don't you dare! Bit of discipline, that's all she needs.
She's just a baby now.
Sit down. Now! Oh, God, but isn't my life bad enough as it is? Stuck here on my own in this house, night after night, frightened off out my head half the time, without you starting.
What are you frightened of, Mum? The air raids, is it?
The air raids. Look, if we're killed, we're killed. And that's God's will, right?
So, what are you frightened of, then?
Of what's going on out there, of course. Oh, Willie, if you knew. If you only knew what's going on out there. The filth. The rising tide of filth.
Perhaps you see somebody, Mum.
Like who? Like an head doctor, perhaps. That's what you think, is it? That perhaps I'm off my head, just 'cause I know what's going on out there. You just keep a civil tongue in your head, my lad. Or else. You have brought it back, haven't you? The belt.
I forgot.
Liar. Liar! Ah! You left it behind on purpose, didn't you? Didn't you?
No, Mum, honest.
But I can get another, you know. Oh, yeah, I know a shop where they sell lots of them. Now get upstairs, out of my sight. And you can shut up and all.
He lay there on a terrible and filthy bed, covered his ears, hoping to block out the sound of the baby of his mother, to hide from all that he hated. In the countryside, a new day dawned, and Tom climbed the stairs to the little attic bedroom. The sunlight streamed through the windows and across the empty bed. He sighed and went back to the kitchen. In London, William pulled his tatty sheets into a neat fold, and as cats fought in the yard below, he crossed to the window to look out. It was gloomy, and all he could see in the yard below was rubbish, filth, and mess. He too sighed, and made his way to the kitchen where his mother was waiting. The baby gurgled at him as William stared apprehensively at his mother, who had her back to him. To his surprise, her mood had changed, and she turned to face him with a smile, indicating a boiled egg and toast that she had placed on the table for him.
Your favourite. Certainly got your appetite back anyway. Must be all that fresh air, I expect. Oh, such a beautiful baby you were, though. Proud as punch I was, wheeling you out in your pram, sun shining, people stopping just to look at you. Where'd you get him from then, Mrs. Evan? Happiest days of my entire life then, Willie.
She sighed and watched him eating with pride. He half smiled at her as he spooned the egg into his mouth. At last he laid down his spoon and licked his fingers.
Finished?
She picked up the plate and took it to the sink. He stood and went to the dresser where they had left his things the night before. He picked up a small package and went to her with it.
Mum?
What's this?
My present to you. It was Mr Tom's idea.
Mr Tom?
I told you, the man I stay with down there. Well, go on, open it.
She took the proffered gift and pulled away the paper wrapping. It was a painting of a cottage.
It's where I live down there.
Perfect in every detail.
Did you steal this?
I did it myself.
Liar.
I did, Mum. Honest I did.
And these? Where did these come from then, eh? Did you steal these as well?
They were presents from Ginny and Carrie.
Girls? You've been mixing with girls down there?
But they're nice, Mum, and they all go to church. Well, except Zach, of course.
Zach?
He's my best friend.
And why doesn't he go to church then?
Because they ain't got one down there. A synagogue, I mean.
A synagogue?
That's what they call their church. The synagogue.
He's Jewish. You're telling me that you've been consorting with Jews down there?
But what's wrong with Jews, Mum? Like Zach says, Jesus was a Jew, wasn't he?
Blasphemer. Blasphemer! You know what we do with blasphemers in this house?
No, Mum! Please! Not there! Please, Mum! Not there!
She grabbed hold of him and was pushing him towards a little wooden door, a door that led to a filthy, rank cupboard with no light and little air. She pushed him inside and threw the door shut on him, turning the key, locking him in. Tom Oakley passed his time now in a kind of dream. He missed the boy more than he dared admit, and he spent hours looking at his paintings and wondering about him. He would play the old harmonium most days now, but never happy tunes, no more Tipperary. And all the while the old radio in the corner told tales of the dreadful hardship London was suffering. One morning, Tom was digging his garden when Zach called round.
Mr. Oakley? Still no news then?
Afraid not.
And Tom would take to waiting for the postman, but always the news was the same.
Sorry, Tom. Still nothing from London, I'm afraid. It's been weeks now, eh? Bit of bad news to Mrs. Hartridge up at the school. That young husband of hers, one of Fly Spitz, missing. Believed dead.
Tom shook his head at the pity of it all. There seemed to be no future for any of them. Still thinking of the boy, he went later that morning to see Mrs. Ford.
Contact him, Mr. Oakley.
Only I thought I'd have heard from him by now, you see. It's been over a month.
It does tend to happen like that, you know, once they get back into the home environment. And after all, only natural for a boy of that age, I suppose, to prefer to be with his own.
He might have accepted this if later that day he hadn't been digging his vegetables and come across the old belt where he'd thrown it that first day. He looked at it ruefully as it tangled round his fork. It was then that he knew. knew that the boy was in trouble, knew that his mother was the cause of it, and he knew that he must go to him. He threw the belt back into the soil, covered it in earth, and ground it in with his boot. Which is why, at 10:30 the following night, he and his dog Sammy were sitting on a train as it pulled slowly into a London station. He stepped from the train amidst a crowd of servicemen. Everyone was in a hurry. There was noise everywhere, hubble and bubble and hustle and hassle, and he felt strange there in all this noise and confusion. He was not used to these things after his quiet life. He was not meant for big towns, but he forced himself through the crowd to ask directions from a ticket collector, and so he rode the 53 bus to the corner where a few days before William and his mother had themselves disembarked. Alone on the street corner, he was shining a small torch on a little piece of paper he had on which was written the boy's address, when suddenly the air raid sirens began to whine. A warden called at some passers-by to go to the shelter. He looked around, unsure what to do, when the warden came over to him.
Lost, are we, sir?
Looks like it.
Never mind about that now. Let's get down to shelter. Come on.
The man took Tom's shoulder and steered him across the street. There was a throng of people now making their way through the sandbagged entrance, and Tom fell into step with them. He was about to duck through the entrance when the warden spoke again.
Oh, sorry, mate. No dogs allowed in the shelter.
So what am I supposed to do with him, eh? Leave him out here to be blown to bits?
Oh, come on, then.
And the man grinned and waved him through. In the shelter there was warmth, music, strong tea, and in the warden, who had taken a bit of shine to Sammy, a willing ear to hear his story about the lost child.
And he definitely didn't run away, you say? Only it's happening all the time. Kids just taking off, coming back to London.
No question of that. Look, I just want to make sure he's all right, that's all.
And you've got an address for him round here, have you?
Tom hastily pulled the crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to the warden.
Well, come tomorrow morning, God willing. We'll see if we can find him for you, shall we?
He was cut short by the crump of a bomb. And so it was all night, the radio, the jollity of the Londoners and the sound of the bombs. In the morning, they sounded the all clear, and Tom and Sammy stepped out into the smoky daylight amidst a flurry of noise. The houses opposite the shelter had been hit, and now, as their friendly warden came over, bodies were being carried from the wreckage to an ambulance. The warden jerked a thumb in their direction.
Young couple, just married. He was home on embarkation leave.
And are they both?
Oh, yeah. Bloody war. Well, I suppose you'll be wanting to find this kid of yours, right?
If it's not...
Just give me 10 minutes, will you?
Of course.
He came back to them soon afterwards and led him through the streets to a dismal road where William's house stood amongst a row of similar houses. The place was horribly depressing, dark and dreary. Tom felt as though London were closing in on him here, overwhelming him. Together they descended the little iron staircase to the basement door. Tom knocked on the faded paint. A woman appeared from the door above.
If it's Mrs. Beach you want in, she's not here.
Well, do you know where she's gone?
Gone to the coast, she said.
And what about the boy? Did he go with her?
Can't remember ever seeing any boy.
Little lad. 10 years old.
Oh, young Willie, you mean? Evacuated to the country last I heard. Probably just as well. Quiet boy, no friends as such. Bullied a lot. Sitting target, really. I mean, this house, real house of mystery, you know. You don't know, do some funny things sometimes.
What sort of things?
Well, whimpers sometimes. Bumps.
Bumps?
Like somebody humping furniture about.
Well, people do move furniture about.
At 3 o'clock in the morning?
So when did you last see her?
About a week ago. In fact, I nearly dropped dead with shock when she condescended to speak to me. Talk about la-di-da.
There's nobody in there, Rover.
Not like him to make a fuss over nothing, huh? Smell something, do you?
The dog was pawing at the door, and Tom went to it. He pushed at it and began to put his shoulder to it.
Look, I'll see if I can find a copper.
But Tom was barging at it now.
Oi, hang on a minute.
He went to stop the old man, but he was too late. The door caved in and Sammy ran through it. Then stepped into the gloom.
God, what died in here then?
The two of them set off after the dog, who had run through into the kitchen. Everywhere there was dirt and decay. Sammy was pawing at the little wooden door. The door had been tied shut, and Tom fumbled at the fastening. The warden stepped forward with his pocket knife.
Here, let me.
He took the blade to the knots, and with some difficulty, for they were tightly tied, he cut them free. He pulled back the latch and threw the door open. Both men recoiled at the terrible stench. The warden fished his torch from his pocket and shone it into the darkness within. Both men froze in horror.
God almighty. What the hell's been going on here?
They looked down at the emaciated face of William. He was deadly pale, thin as a rake, and he lay in his own filth. One arm was tied to a gas pipe, the other held a bundle. It was his baby sister. They cut him free, and they called the police and an ambulance. Gently they got the boy to a chair, but he sat there silent, and he wouldn't let go of the baby. A police officer gently tried to persuade him.
All right. Let me have the baby, son.
Get away.
Let me.
Tom stepped forward. He knelt beside William, looked at him, nodded.
What's his name then, William?
It's Nurse. I call her Trudy.
Trudy. That's a nice name. You gonna let me have a hold then?
The boy looked at him. There was distrust in his eyes, but Tom smiled and moved a little closer. Around the room stood the ambulance people, the police and the warden, but they were no part of this private grief between the old man and the boy. Slowly Tom stretched out his arms. Again the boy hesitated, and then he reluctantly gave up his burden. Tom had known the baby was dead, even before he felt its stiff, cold body. He handed the little thing to the ambulance woman, but she could not help it now. Suddenly William collapsed as if a great load had been taken from his shoulders, and he threw his arms round Mr. Tom.
Why didn't you come? I kept calling for you, but you didn't come.
They took William in an ambulance to the hospital. Mr. Tom followed on foot, and when he arrived in the casualty department, which was noisy and crammed with the victims of last night's air raid, a doctor and a nurse were already examining the boy. The doctor looked up angrily at Tom.
Are you related to this child?
No.
And who are you?
The one who found him.
Just in time, I'd say.
Well, Dr. Redford reported casualty immediately.
All right. Take him down to Children's and see that he gets a tetanus. And what the hell is that dog doing in here?
I'm sorry, you really will have to get that animal out of here, you know.
As Tom turned to go, he spoke to William.
Won't be far away. Don't you worry.
They wheeled William away, and reluctantly Tom and Sammy made their way outside. As he stood in the busy street wondering what to do, a voice hailed him.
Tom?
It was the warden.
How is he?
Any news about the mother?
No. There'll be prison for her, I reckon, when they do catch up with her.
And is there a husband?
There was once, apparently. Found dead in an alley years ago, choked on his own vomit. Seems his idea of family life was drinking himself silly, then coming home and using her as a punch bag. The kid as well, I shouldn't wonder. So, you'll be going back to the country now, will you?
Not without William, I won't.
And with a determined face, he set off to look for digs for the night. For William, the day passed in a blur of sleep, medication, injections, and baths. He finally fell asleep, head shaven, in the children's ward, but it was in the small hours that a terrible nightmare woke him. A nurse came swiftly to him, a syringe in her hand. The next morning, Tom tied Sammy to a post by a mobile canteen and smiled at the woman who worked there.
Keep an eye on him, will you?
Thanks.
He made his way swiftly to the children's ward, not wanting to miss a moment of the precious visiting hours. A nurse met him in the corridor and hastened to his side.
He's in deep shock, Mr. Oakley. We've had to keep him well sedated, I'm afraid.
He stepped through into the ward and walked over to William. Words failed him at the sight of the pale boy, at the dark, black shadows under his eyes and his shaven head. He was asleep, and Tom couldn't bring himself to waken him. He sat there almost until the end of visiting time before he woke, and when he did stir, they had already rung the first bell. But at the sight of Mr. Tom, the boy smiled. Tom nodded at his hair.
Well, saves combing, I suppose. How are you feeling now?
I had a nightmare. They stuck this needle in me. Can't I come in with you, Mr. Tom?
I'm afraid you have to leave now.
Don't go. Stay a bit more.
Now, you just concentrate on getting yourself better, all right?
Tom stood and waved his goodbyes, but as he was leaving the ward, a middle-aged man in a suit stepped up to him. He pointed to William.
Not something I have a lot of faith in myself, mind you, drugging them. You'll be Mr. Tom, then?
Tom Oakley.
My name's Stelton. I'm a psychiatrist. I work in conjunction with a children's home. Our feeling is that he'd benefit from treatment there.
What sort of treatment?
Psychiatric treatment.
I'd like him to come back home with me.
As I understand it, you aren't actually related to him, Mr. Oakley.
So, are there any other relatives who'd take him in?
Well, that's, of course, something that we would have to go into.
And if there aren't?
As I said, there is the children's home.
Tom looked at him, steadily, disdainfully. And then he turned on his heel, and without another word, he marched away. Already a plan was forming in his mind, and as he untied Sammy, it was becoming clearer to him. He made his way through the London streets to the terrible house where he had found William. Waiting for a quiet moment when no one was around, he pushed his shoulder against the door that the police had crudely padlocked. It opened easily, and he made his way through the gloom to the little bedroom. He found the clothes that Alice Fletcher had given the boy, and stuffed them hastily into his rucksack. Now he had to wait until dark. He passed the day uneasily wandering through the streets, and in his mind going over his plan again and again. When it was dark, he went once more to the hospital gates and tied Sammy to a lamp-post. The dog whimpered as he left him, but Tom never looked back. He slipped into the hospital unnoticed, through a side door he had spotted earlier, and made his way to the corridor by the children's ward. He stood for a second, peering through a window in the swing doors, waiting for a nurse to enter the sluice room, and then, as she disappeared, he stepped quickly through the doors and took a wheelchair that had been left there. The side ward where William lay was quiet. The children were all asleep. He padded softly to the boy's bed. Looking round once more, he lifted the still, drugged form over his shoulder and into the wheelchair. It was a matter of seconds for him to wheel the child away swiftly back into the main corridor, and from there he hastily made his way to the side door, and with the boy over his shoulder, he ran to where he had left Sammy. He'd done it. He had rescued William, and without further ado, they had made their way to the bus stop and taken a bus to the station to catch the night train home. Home to Tom's home, and to William's home. The sun shone brightly, the sky was blue, and the river gleamed as Tom's little pony and trap trotted towards the village. The figure that lay huddled against him as he drove was a piteous sight, pale, wrapped in a threadbare coat and head covered in a balaclava. But now he stirred and opened his eyes in amazement.
Mr. Tom? How did I get here?
I kidnapped you.
Oh.
That's what I did, boy. I kidnapped you.
And shouting for joy, his voice echoing through the valleys, they splashed through the little ford and rounded the corner into the village.
I kidnapped you!
He sent for Dr. Little, who came that evening and examined William, now tucked up in his own little attic room with great care.
Well, I seem to have patched you up pretty well at the hospital, William. Now, you just settle down and I'll call in to see you again tomorrow, all right?
He patted the boy's head and smiled at him before descending the stairs to find Tom waiting below.
The sores will soon heal, of course. It's the wounds inside we need to worry about.
Right.
And you do realise, don't you, Tom, that sooner or later they're bound to come looking for him.
Nah, they're far too busy to go chasing evacuees. Besides, they didn't even know he was in London. She sorted that.
Good night, then, Tom.
Night, Doctor. Oh, and you will let young Zach know he's back.
You mean he hasn't been around here yet?
And the doctor trudged off into the night. But later, in the small hours, Tom was awoken from his sleep by a dreadful crying.
Hey! 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 Come on now, come on.
It's him, Mr. Tom! It's him!
And gasping for breath, he lay in Tom's arms, staring at some terrible vision visible only to himself, until he fell into a troubled sleep. And so he gradually got stronger, and it was a few mornings later, when Tom crept into his room and removed the blackout curtain, that William woke with a start and stared around.
How are you feeling?
I want to come down.
All right.
William threw back the bedclothes, watched by the man with some pride. But as soon as his feet touched the floor, he swayed, and before Mr. Tom could get there, he had fallen with a thud.
Oh, dear. That's all right. Get back in. There we are. Don't worry. Now get stronger. There we are.
He tucked him back in, and a few minutes later he was in his kitchen cooking breakfast for the boy, pleased that at least his appetite was back, when suddenly the back door flew open and a breathless, red-faced Zack burst in.
Don't you ever knock?
Sorry. So, was him today, Mr. Oakley?
When he's had his breakfast, you can.
But it takes ages. You know what he's like. He chews everything.
I thought we all did.
Not everybody. I just give one a quick bite to swallow it. Mr. Tom?
Yes?
Is that Zack down there?
Go on now. Take that.
Thanks, Mr. Oakley.
And taking William's breakfast tray, he made his way upstairs. Having satisfied his hunger, the two set about the serious business of catching up on the news.
So what's been happening while I've been away? Not a lot. Been dead boring, really. Oh, except Mrs. Hartridge's husband got shot down and killed. Lisa never found him, but she still had the baby okay. Baby? You did know she was having a baby? No. But you must have noticed how big she'd got. You do know about sex and stuff, don't you?
Only it's something dirty and you go to war for it.
That's rubbish, Will. My dad says sex is just a man and a woman's way of showing how much they love each other. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for sex, any of us.
But can't a lady have a baby on her own?
Of course not. There has to be a man involved.
Tom had been on his way upstairs, and had heard most of this through the door. Realizing the dangerous territory they were now on, he stepped into the room.
Right, Zack. Home time for you, I think. You don't want William overdoing it.
But I can't come and see him tomorrow, Mr. Oakley.
Of course you can.
In that case, I'll see you tomorrow then, Will.
So, what's all that about then?
Zack says a lady can't have a baby without a man.
Oh, yeah?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Trudy's dead, isn't she?
I think you knew that already, didn't you?
And I killed her.
You killed her?
I should have got out. I did try. Honest, I did.
Well, of course you did. Only you were tied up, right? Only what you have to remember is that the way she treated you and the baby was because your mum was sick, William. In fact, very sick, I'd say, to do what you did. The trouble was, with this war on, people so busy surviving themselves to even notice, so there was no one to help. Now, you tell me something, William. This nightmare you keep having, it's always the same one, right? And it's always the same man. Who is he, this man?
Just this man.
And what does this man do in your dream?
Just keep saying I have to go with him.
Tom nodded and wondered. He got slowly better, and even took to taking short walks around the village, heavily wrapped up in his coat and balaclava. He knew that Tom was doing some work for Mrs. Hartridge, painting her cottage, and one day he decided to face up to his fears and see her and the baby. He knocked at her door with some trepidation, but it was Tom who appeared with a flaming blowtorch from the side of the house.
Hello! What are you doing here?
Come to see Mrs. Hartridge.
She's round the back.
They trudged round to the little back garden. Mrs. Hartridge sat in a wicker chair, and at her feet, lying on a rug and gurgling in the summer sun, was a little baby. William stopped, looked. The sight of the baby was too much for him, and then Mrs. Hartridge spoke.
Hello, William. Now, this is my Peggy, who looks just like her dad, they reckon. So, how are you feeling now?
I'm all right.
Oh, well, at least you're back safe and sound anyway, eh? So, how about a glass of lemonade, then?
Yeah, please.
Then you just hold on to my Peggy for me, will you, while I get it?
He didn't know if he could. Memories came flooding back. He stood looking at her, and behind him Tom watched, wondering what he would do. Then he went over to the chair and sat down. Mrs. Hartridge placed the baby in his arms, and as she went over to Tom, the boy began to smile, and then he rocked the baby in his arms. One day, Tom and Zack paused by a newspaper placard outside the village shop. Its stark message made Zack's face fall. East End blitzed. Many dead.
That's where my dad's based. In the East End. He'll be all right. Of course he will.
And somberly they parted, each to his home and to his tea. But when William arrived at the cottage, there was a surprise that seemed to be in keeping with the mood that the newspaper hoarding had left on both of them. A little group was waiting for him. There was Mr. Tom, Mrs. Ford, a policeman, a stranger in a dark suit, and Dr. Stelton, the man who'd wanted him to go to the home. William froze at the sight of Tom's bleak look. For a moment no one spoke, and then Mrs. Ford swallowed nervously.
I'm afraid we have some bad news for you, William. It's about your mother.
She don't want me back again, does she?
She's dead, William.
Dead?
I'm afraid she drowned herself, son.
Now, Dr. Stelton's here from a children's home in Sussex. Lovely place, from what I'm told. Right out in the country.
I'm sure you're going to like it there, William.
I want to stay here with Mr. Tom. Tell them, Mr. Tom, I want to stay here with you.
Now then, that's enough of that, my lad. Your Mr. Oakley is in trouble enough as it is. It's a serious offence, this kidnapper.
I weren't kidnapped. I were rescued.
Why doesn't William wait upstairs?
It was the man in the suit who had spoken. He had a calm authority about him, and the others showed him a natural deference. Tom turned to William.
Go on then, up you go.
Tom led the boy past the others and to the staircase to his room, but as they mounted the steps, Tom spoke quietly to him.
William!
man in your dream? Is that him, the one with the moustache?
William nodded, and Tom's jaw set into a hard line.
Right.
He waved William up to his room and returned to the others.
This, children's home you're on about taking him to?
Oh, yes.
You're in charge there, are you?
That's right.
Only, he's been having these nightmares, you see, ever since I got him back here.
It's hardly surprising, Mr. Oakley, after all he's
About
been through.
you, apparently.
Me, Mr. Oakley?
That you're going to come and take him away again. In fact, he wakes up regularly, screaming about it.
All of which bears out what I've just been saying, I think. What the lad needs is specialist medical treatment.
What the lad needs is love, Dr. Stelton. Something he hadn't seen a lot of, apparently, before he came to me. Now, are you people really trying to tell me that he's going to get more of that where you're on about taking him to than he is here? Because if you are, I'm telling you, you're talking a right load of rubbish.
Mr. Oakley, Dr. Stelton is one of the very best people in his field, and you can take it from me that along with the rest of us, his one and only concern here is for the boy's own welfare. Let's get a spot of fresh air. Shall we, Mr. Oakley?
And again, with that quiet authority, the man, whose name was Greenway, opened the door to the back garden and ushered Tom through.
But then it isn't the boy's welfare this is all about. Really, is it, Mr. Oakley?
Isn't it?
No, it's about you, I'd say. Your welfare.
Me?
A lonely, and from what I hear, embittered old man, facing a lonely and bitter old age.
You really think that's the only reason I want him back? Just to be company for me when I'm past it?
Well, isn't it, basically?
No, it bloody well isn't, and I resent the implication.
Doesn't it bother you at all that when you're 70, he's still going to be in his teens?
Of course it bothers me. I'm not stupid, you know. There's not a lot we can do about that, is there? Look, I know it's not an ideal situation, anything but I'll put it this way. It's got to be a damn sight more ideal than your Dr. Stelton in there turning him into some sort of human guinea pig.
Just tell me one thing, Mr. Oakley. Why is the boy suddenly so important to you? He's an evacuee, for God's sake. And one at that, as I understand it, you took violent exception to having foisted on you in the first place.
Isn't it obvious?
Not to me, no. Nor to Dr. Stelton.
Because I love him, of course. As if he was my own flesh and blood, I do. And for what it's worth, I think he loves me as well.
And is that really enough, do you think, in this day and age?
Well, I suppose it has to be, hasn't it, Mr. Greenway? In this day and age or any other. Because if it isn't, what else is there, eh?
And Greenway stopped then and looked at this man who spoke the simple truth, and he nodded, and he took his arm and led him away. It was some time later that the door to William's room opened, and Tom entered. William looked up, eyes blazing.
I won't go with them, Mr. Tom. I won't go with them.
Oh, won't you?
No, I won't.
Just as well then, isn't it? Nobody's asking you to.
What?
Come here.
Tom moved to the window, and they both looked out at the departing forms of their visitors.
You see that one in the dark suit?
Yeah.
Well, he's from something called the Home Office. And he reckons that after all the trouble you've caused, he don't want you back anymore, thanks. So, as long as I adopt you, all legal and proper like, looks like I'm stuck with you, doesn't it?
Oh, Mr. Tom!
There was no more to be said. There was no more that could be said. He threw himself into Mr. Tom's arms, and they hugged fit to bust. It was with a smiling face and a light heart that he ran across the village to the Littles' house to see Zack. He arrived breathless at their front door.
Mrs. Little, can I see Zack? Only I got some really great news to tell him.
Of course you can, William. He's upstairs, packing.
Packing?
Yes. You see, he's just had some news himself.
Not very good news in his case, I'm afraid.
Stunned that just after the sun had burst upon his life a cloud should have lowered upon Zack's, he climbed the stairs to Zack's room. Zack looked at him glumly.
Got a phone call from my mum. They bombed the docks, and my dad was there. I'm sure he'll be alright, of course. Take more than a German bomb to stop him. Only I have to go and see him. Just in case he's...
But Zack couldn't say any more, and he turned away from his friend. So Zack left, and several days went by, days of gloom for William. Then one morning he and Mr. Tom sat at their breakfast listening to the news.
Here is the news. Last night's mass air raid on London is estimated to have been the heaviest of the war so far. At least 400 people have been killed and 1,400 seriously injured. Fires are still burning all over the city, and many homes in the East End have been razed to the ground. The fire and the rescue...
Tom had stood up and clicked the radio off. He could see William's face. He knew what he was thinking, and indeed secretly he too suspected the worst. The days went by, and they did their best to occupy the time and to think happier, brighter things, like Tom adopting William, but a shadow hung over everything. Alice Fletcher came to see Tom one day, and over tea she asked what neither of them dared to speak of any more.
Still no word from Zack, then?
Afraid not.
That poor child.
William took to visiting the railway station whenever the London train was due, but there was never any sign of the smiling boy in the white and red jumper. It was one day after such a fruitless wait that he returned to the cottage. He opened the door to find Tom and Dr. and Mrs. Little huddled together over an official-looking letter. He knew then, before they even spoke, he knew then that Zack was dead.
Oh, William.
Mrs. Little tried to speak, but words failed her.
William.
For William, the world had become a blur, and he felt himself slipping into unconsciousness. Tom caught him before he fell to the ground. For a few days he rested and spoke very little. He dragged his way through school, coped with his chores, did his homework, but inside something had died. Then one day he was not at school. His desk stood empty. Mrs. Hartridge turned to the class.
Has anybody any idea where William is today?
No, Mrs. Hartridge.
William had taken all he could take. He was stung by the endless injustices of his short life. There must be somebody responsible, someone to blame for all his pain. He went to the church and stood there in front of the altar. Then he threw back his head and screamed at his Maker. Mrs. Hartridge knew the agony the boy was in, and how confused he was. She didn't hesitate when she found he was missing, but hurried to find Tom, who was in his workshop.
Is William all right, Mr. Oakley?
Well, he's still very upset, of course, but... Why?
Only that he didn't turn up at school today. Or rather, he did. Then...
Tom waited for him all day. When tea time came, he sat patiently by the fire, looking up at the clock. He knew better than to chase after the boy. He knew he would return, and return he did, much later.
Where have you been?
But the boy didn't reply, simply shrugged his shoulders.
You all right?
Yeah.
Up you go and wash then. Tea'll be on the table in 5 minutes.
I'm not hungry.
And he clumped up the stairs. The next day, Tom sought advice.
Can we have a word, Doctor?
Of course, Tom. Come in.
But as he entered the surgery, Tom thought he saw a solution to his problems leaning against the wall in the doctor's hallway. It was the bicycle. Zack's bicycle. Later that day, William, still heavy-hearted, wandered round to Tom's workshop. He stopped at the sight of the shiny red bike leaning against the wall.
Dr. Little sent it round for you. Thought you might like to learn to ride it. Sure Zach would have wanted you to have it.
But William turned on his heels and fled into the cottage. It was then Tom decided that enough was enough, and he made his way steadfastly after the boy, whom he found slumped on the stairs. Tom looked bleakly at him, then spoke.
Now, you just come with me for a minute.
He took him firmly by the hand and marched him out of doors and through the little side gate into the churchyard. He didn't stop until he reached the grave of his wife and child. He made Tom stand there by the grave, and then he turned serious eyes on him.
You think you're the only person who ever lost anybody? It's happening to people all over. This very minute. And all because some maniac wants to rule the world. And how do you think I felt, eh, when it happened to me? Not just my wife I lost, you know. She was my best pal as well. My very best. And my lad. And they not even here. Except I didn't lose them, you see. Not really. Because they're still here. Inside here. And always will be. Just like Zach will be for you. In every little thing you'll ever remember about him. And that is something that nobody can ever take away from you. Nobody. Ever.
The two looked at each other then. They looked, and they understood each other, and their love for one another was very strong. Then William reached out and put his arms round the old man, and at last his soul was at ease. From then on, William knew what he must do. He had to learn to ride the shiny red bike. He had to learn to ride it for Zach and for Tom, because he knew then that he owed so much to both of them. It wasn't as easy as he'd hoped. He fell off it more times than he stayed on it, and for Tom, peeking at his efforts from behind the net curtains of their cottage, every tumble made him wince and want to go out and help. But he knew he mustn't. The boy had to manage alone. And then, just as he had managed a small circle of the village green without falling off more than twice, his precarious progress was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Mrs. Hartridge waving a letter.
William! William! What's wrong, Mrs. Hartridge? Nothing's wrong, William. It's just... Well, I had to tell somebody. See, I've just had this telegram about my David, and he isn't dead after all. He's alive. A prisoner of war. Isn't that wonderful, William? Isn't that absolutely wonderful?
Yes, Mrs. Hartridge, really wonderful.
William took the bike to the very top of the hill above the river and beyond the village. He had to push it to the top of the steep slope. It was too much to cycle. For an instant, he stood looking down on the world below, at the river, the farms, and the village, and the doctor's surgery, the church, and next to it the little cottage and workshop that were now his home. He looked down on all this, and he knew it was his new world. And then he climbed onto the saddle, kicked hard at the pedals, and flew off down the hill at breakneck speed, his head thrown back, his mouth open, shouting a cry of freedom, a cry of excitement. He tore down the hill and into the village high street, ringing the bell wildly, and he arrived at breakneck speed in front of the startled Tom.
I can ride, Dad! I can really ride!
Right!
And Tom Oakley thought that he might burst with the joy that the little boy had found in life, and burst with the pride of being his dad. Goodnight Mr Tom, based on the novel by Michelle Magorian. Screenplay by Brian Finch, produced by Chris Burt, directed by Jack Gold. Music composed and conducted by Carl Davis. A central program for ITV. Audio narration written by Michael Cameron and read by Nick Lucas. Audio production engineered and produced by Peter Scott at the Flying Dutchman Company. Produced for audio by Acorn Media.